Jesus. Today, just like we have read from the lesson for today, which says there was a question among the disciple of Jesus. They were asking one another who should be the greatest. And if you look into our contemporary society today, you will discover that this question is still ongoing. Everybody wants to find out who is the greatest man. That is why you see a lot of people jockeying to be the president of nation. They are jockeying to be the president, to be the bishop of a diocese. They are jockeying to be this, to be that. There is always that leadership question that everybody is trying uh, to find an answer to. But then I'd like you to know that in this service today, we want to talk about a leadership that is not so common. A lot of people don't even want to be one of this kind of leadership that I want to talk about today. And that is servant leadership. Servant leadership. And I'd like you to know that servant leadership is the art of true leadership. Servant leadership is not a type of leadership that is looking for what to benefit from the system. Servant leadership is a type of leadership that is ready to give it all. Is a type of leadership that is ready to release every potential that has been deposited inside of him for the benefit of the people around him. So that leads us to the greatest leadership question of all time. I believe that this is one of the greatest uh, leadership questions and is one of the greatest debates of all time. Who is the greatest among you? When we were in primary school, there is always that question, who is going to be the class captain? If you remember, I remember very well, it's always a tug of war to decide who becomes the class captain during my days in my school, in my primary school, and also in my secondary school. It's always a big deal to know who is going to become uh, the the social prefect, the head boy, uh, the all those positions in schools in those times is always a big deal. For example, in my own school, the secondary school that I went to, you don't necessarily have to be the best student to be the head boy in my school. In some school, that is a criteria. You have to be the best student in the school to be the head boy. But in my own school, we look beyond academic performance. Even though as the head boy, you must be good academically, but that is not the only criteria that they use to decide who becomes the head boy. For example, the head boy in my own set in secondary school was not even near the best students in my school. He was a good student, no doubt, but he wasn't there among the best 10, I would say. But still, he's our head boy. Why? Because the school authority believes that being a leader goes beyond just being good academically. You need to have every other attribute of a leader before you can become a leader. And one of the greatest attributes we can all imbibe as leaders is the attribute of a servant leader. The attribute of a servant leader. This month, if you have seen our prophetic declaration for this month, is my month of leading like Christ. And we all saw the example of how Christ led through the lesson that we read. Jesus Christ said, who is it that is a leader? Is it he that is sitting at the table, or he that is serving at the table? He said, I am among you as he who is serving. So a true leader will be committed to service. He will not be committed to what is in need for me. And there are a lot of people who are in leadership because of what they want to eat. That is not the kind of leadership we are trying to promote here. The kind of leadership that we are promoting in this service and through the word of God is a leadership that is ready to serve other people. A leadership that is ready to serve other people. Now let's talk about the human's conception around leadership. Like I already established, we all desire leadership position of some sort. Whether you want to be, whether as a head of a family, or like one of uh, my my grandpas in my own family is always, I don't see anything wrong in that anyway, but is always emphasizing the fact that he is the first grandfather in our family, and nobody actually is contesting that with him. But i'm just I'm just letting us know that uh leadership conception could be such that even a little girl, a little boy, wants to exercise some forms of leadership. They want to be sure they are in charge of certain things. And that is how we humans have been wired. We are all wired to want to take authority. We are all wired to want uh, to take preeminence over other people. And you can't fault us because that is the way God created us. Because when God created man, he said, I have given you dominion. Dominion is a leadership authority. To be given dominion means you have been given leadership authority. And God has given each and every one of us that dominion. But we are not given dominion over our friends and neighbors. We are given dominion over fishes of the sea, over cattle that walks on the ground. We are given dominion over things that were created, not over our fellow human being. But unfortunately, where people are trying to exercise their dominion is over their fellow human. We are not to exercise dominion over people. We are to serve people. And I believe we will all get this into our understanding. So, what is your call into this leadership? How does your call into leadership looks like? Many a times it will look as if we are repeating the same thing, but it's just for you to get that the true heart of leadership is really service. That is the whole essence of this topic that we are treating, is to get it into your mind that leadership is all about service. So what does your call into leadership, what does it look like? Jesus Christ declared, I am among you as one who serves. He's not just sitting there and waiting for people to bring him this, to bring him that. There are some leaders like that. They will just sit down and cross their leg and make people to be running around for them. Particularly if you have witnessed the way our kings in Nigeria, for the community who have kings in Nigeria, if you see the way our kings operate, they sit down, you see people running up and down, you see even elderly people prostrating for them. That is not the kind of leadership that Jesus is promoting. He said, I am among you as one who serves. So the goal and philosophy of a servant leader is to serve others credibly. That is the goal and the philosophy of a servant leader. It is to serve others credibly or with credibility. Now, I'm going to tried to differentiate between two kinds of leadership. And this was first illustrated by John C. Maxwell, and I'm practically borrowing that idea from him. There is a type of leadership that he calls wash hand basin leadership, but I call it wash hand basin principle. This type of leadership is focused on self, is a selfish thinking leader or self-serving leader. That is the wash hand basin leadership. And what does this wash hand basin leadership look like? If you remember the story of Pilate, how many of us can remember Pilate in the Bible? Pilate, when he was about to crucify Jesus Christ, and after examining Jesus Christ, he couldn't find fault in Jesus Christ. But instead of him to discharge and acquit Jesus of all the allegations leveled against him and release him, he decided to bring a basin of water and began to wash his hand. I said, I wash my hand off all this allegation you are bringing onto Jesus. In other words, what was he trying to say? He was trying to say, well, you people are the one accusing this man. As for me, I can't find any fault in him. So I am absorbing myself of every responsibility of whatever happens to him. That is not a good leader. That is a self-serving leader. That is a selfish thinking leader. And you don't want to be that kind of leader who does not want to take a responsibility, particularly when it involves the entire community. He wants to shift the responsibility on the people. He doesn't want to assume responsibility for whatever action that is going to take place, which will be on behalf of the community that is serving. So that is one type of leader, or one type of leadership, that is called wash hand basin leadership. Now, the other principle of leadership is feet washing principle, or feet washing leadership. How many of us also remember that Jesus washed the disciples' feet? You remember that was the night that preceded the Good Friday, when he was crucified, at the Passover night. You remember what Jesus Christ did on that day, on the Thursday of that day, where the tradition of the church, where we now, the day which we now called Maundy Thursday, there was a leader who was washing his hand, and that was Pilate. But this other leader, which is Jesus, rather than wash his hand and wash his own leg and said, I don't have anything to do with what is happening here, he decided to wash the disciples' feet. I'd like you to begin to picture the numbers of, there were no vehicles in those days. There were not even bicycles in those days. So everywhere people go, they use their leg to go there. Or they can either use boats if they are going by water, or they use, or they use an animal, to transport themselves. But most if they are going to a number of places, they usually walk with their legs. And so when they are walking with their legs must have gathered a lot of dust. And here comes Jesus, the creator of heaven and earth. The one who created the people is washing their feet. He called them together and began to wash their feet. There was one leader who was washing his own hand, absorbing himself of responsibility. And there was another man taking responsibility and washing the disciples' feet. justifying the statement which he has made earlier on, that I am among you as one who serves. This is modeling servant leadership in practice. When you wash your disciples' feet, or when you serve people that are lower than you in position or in status, when you serve people that are lower than you in status, what you are doing is that you are modeling servant leadership in practice. And that is what Jesus did. He modeled the servant leadership, which we are all, I believe we all wanted it, but some of us are too proud to embrace the totality of servant leadership. And Jesus Christ demonstrated this by washing the feet of the disciples. So this is your call into a leadership. So the question is, which type of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be a self-serving leader who only wants to wash his hand of all responsibility? Or you want to be a model of a servant leader who takes responsibility and wash other people's feet by serving them? Which type of leader do you want to be? Now, so what is the purpose of leadership? I believe we need to get that straight in our mind. What is the purpose of leadership? Remember, our theme for this month is leading like Christ. What is the purpose of leadership? Leadership has no other purpose other than to enrich and enhance human progress. Leadership has no other purpose other than to enrich and enhance human progress. Leadership is not about what is in it for me as a benefit. And this is my own opinion. My opinion is that every genuine leader should be able to render service for the good of humanity or mankind without hoping to be paid in return. When we are serving others, don't let us always judge it by how much returns we are making from it. When you are serving, serve wholeheartedly without expectation of what is going to be a reward for you. That is my own opinion of what a genuine leader should do to render a service for humanity. Now let's talk about some of the characteristics of a servant leadership, or if you want to say characteristics of a servant leader, but characteristics of servant leadership. And here are some of the characteristics that I have discovered about servant leaders. If you have found any servant leader anywhere, you will always find about 10 or 8 of these characteristics, about 8 of them. You will always find it present in their life. Number 1, servant leaders are active listeners. They are active listeners. They always have ear to listen. They always pay attention to people. They don't judge people before people speaks. They are active listeners. Number 2, they show empathy towards others. What does it mean to show empathy? Empathy means to put yourself in the position of other people. So when you are empathizing with people, you are not sympathizing with them. You see, when you sympathize with people, you are only sympathizing with them based on what they are going through. But when you empathize with people, you put yourself in that position of what they are going through. And you begin to feel what they are feeling at that moment. And that is what a servant leader does. They empathize with other people. Number 3, they can be easily persuaded. If you are a leader and people cannot persuade you over anything, then you are not a good leader. A servant leader can be easily persuaded. Now, when I say they can be easily persuaded, I don't mean to say they can be persuaded to do bad things. What I mean is that they can be persuaded when it is for the benefit for the community. They can be persuaded when a decision or a particular idea or program is for the benefit of the community. They can be easily persuaded. Number 4, they excel in their leadership by communicating well with team members. So one of the attributes of a servant leader is that they are able to communicate well with other people, especially with their team members. It's not that some leaders cannot even communicate, and so there is always confusion in the camp. But a servant leader is able to communicate, and we see that in Jesus all the time. He was always able to communicate his needs to his disciples. Number 5, servant leader always demonstrates self and environmental awareness. Some leaders, they don't have self-awareness. Not only that, they don't even have environmental awareness. But if you are a servant leader, you will be self-aware of yourself. You will be self-aware of your environment. They will have environmental awareness and they will have self-awareness. And that is what keeps them humble all the time. Because they are self-aware, they know what their weaknesses are, they know what their strengths are, they know what they are not good at, so they are not pretending, or they are not using bold face to subdue their weaknesses. There are some leaders who are like that. They know they are weak in particular area, but they don't want their team members to know that they are weak. But unfortunately, there is none of your weakness that your followers don't know about. In fact, the first thing your followers knows about you is your weakness. Not your strength. It's your weakness they will first recognize. So a servant leader is self-aware, and they also have environmental awareness. They know what is good for the community. They know what is good for the group. Number 6, a servant leader encourages others by fostering teamwork and team building. One of the key words of a servant leader is building team. They enjoy to build team. They don't run a solo life. They don't want to take all the glory for themselves. They love to build teams together. They love to foster a relationship with other people so that they can do the work together and achieve their goals together. So that is one of the quality or characteristics of a servant leader. They foster teamwork and they also encourage team building. And the next one, which I'm going to say, is also like what I've just said first on point number 6, which is point number 7, which is servant leader also demonstrates strong commitment towards the growth of team members. They are always committed to ensure that the team members that they have are always growing. The growth of their team members is very, very important to them more than anything else. Because if you are not growing as a leader, if your team are not growing as a people, there is no way your organization or your community can experience growth. So for the community to experience growth, one of the things that servant leader does is to show strong commitment to the growth and development of their team members. You can say that in a way that is part of team building. that servant leaders does. And last but not the least, the eighth characteristics of a servant leader is that they demonstrate strong stewardship and accountability. They demonstrate strong stewardship and accountability. Jesus Christ said, I am among you as one who serves. Servant leaders are always wanting to serve. That is what motivates them. Service. That is what propels them into action. And not only that, they are also accountable. There are some leaders, they are not accountable to their fellow men. For example, in my own ministry, one of the area I try to show accountability, some leaders don't see anything good, they don't see anything, they don't see it as important. But for me, it's a way of demonstrating my accountability. Every week, I always, since I know I've been a priest, I've always demonstrated this. Every week, I always put the statement of income that we had the previous week, I always put at the back of my bulletin. Some people have challenged me. Why do you always put the money you collected in the service at the back of the bulletin? I said, so that everybody can follow, so that everybody can know how much we are worth in the church, so that everybody can know how much we are doing, so that nobody will think maybe $1 million is coming from somewhere and they don't know how their pastor is spending the money. It's so that if you are taking if you want to take special interest in how much comes into the church and you want to cross-check at the end of the year, you can always check with us if we are actually doing right and if we are not doing it. And at the end of every year, by the beginning of the year, I also present, with the help of the wardens, we always present a statement of income, end of the year report for every PCC member to be able to see how much was generated in the church for the year and how much we spent on what and what. And it's there for everybody to see. And I can tell you, I've been in the ministry, ordained ministry now, but I've been preaching since 1998. But my ordained ministry, I was ordained in 2009. Since I have been ordained into the ministries in 2009, I have never had monetary issue in any church that I have pastored. And I have pastored many churches. I have never had monetary issue with any church that I have pastored, because one of my responsibilities as a leader is to be accountable. And that is one of the ways I know to be accountable. I know some priests, they will spend just 6 months in a church and they begin to have trouble with that church. Why? Because of money. And there is sometimes some of them may not be stealing money, but because they are not accountable enough. If you are not, for the fact that you are not stealing money does not mean you are accountable. It is being able to present your stewardship in a way that people will know that you are very plain and true to them. Now, I pastor 2 churches today, and this is the same strategy I employ in the 2 churches. I have never had any occasion for anybody from anywhere to query me or to question me over anything over money. And that is to tell you that that principle is working. You have to be accountable. You have to demonstrate a strong stewardship as a servant leader. Now, what are the preeminent principles of a servant leadership, Now, these are the principles that I consider to be preeminent. These are the principles that I consider to be preeminent in the operation of a servant leader. there are four main preeminent principles that guides the operation of a servant leader. They are: number one, servant leaders encourages diversity of thinking. If you are a servant leader, you will know that every opinion counts. You will not overlook the opinion of people in the running of the organization that you are leading. Everyone's opinion will be valid. Everyone will be counted as important. So you will encourage diversity of thinking. There are some leaders, they don't want other people to talk. It is only their ideas they want the organization to always follow at all times. When you see somebody criticizing their idea, they become angry. That is not the quality, that is not the preeminent, that is one of the preeminent principles of a servant leader. A servant leaders encourage diversity of thinking. Another thing about servant leader, another preeminent principle, is that they create a culture of trust. If you are a leader and your people cannot trust you, or there is no culture of trust in the organization you are leading, people are kind of not very sure of who you are. That is a problem. But if you are a genuine servant leader, you will foster that culture. You will create that culture of trust. People will trust you. Everybody will be trustworthy of one another. We will all trust one another. We will not be skeptical about ourselves. So we foster a culture of trust. Another preeminent principle of servant leadership is that a servant leader possesses an unselfish thinking. A servant leader possesses an unselfish thinking. When you see a leader always wanting his own way to be the only way, is a selfish leader. But when you think what Sister A is saying is also valid, what Sister B is saying is also valid, then you are become an unselfish thinker. So that is one of the preeminent principles of a servant leader. They possess an unselfish thinking. That means they allow every person to bear their mind. Number four, a servant leader develops the leadership potential in other people. They are not suppressing people who are wanting to rise as a leader. There are some leaders who are like that. When they see some people who are going to be a potential leader in the future, rather than help them to grow, they will be suppressing them. They will not be giving them opportunity to demonstrate their leadership gifts. That is not who a servant leader is. A servant leader allows everybody under his leadership to thrive. If you are not allowing others to thrive as a leader, you are not a servant leader. And lastly, let's talk about the failure of leadership. Whenever you see a leader who has entitlement and inheritance mentality, there is nothing short but the failure of that leader. As far as I am concerned, the only leaders that I know who usually have entitlement and inheritance mentality are the kings in our local community. But for me as a person, I hate that institution, because it's an institution who believes they have been born to rule. It's an institution who believes no other people can rule like them. And that is not what leadership is. A leader must not have an entitlement and inheritance mentality. You must hand that entitlement, that leadership position that you are looking for must be earned through service, not through entitlement. And this is what I consider to be the failure of leadership. Don't have entitlement mentality. Don't think you are a leader because you are ordained to be a leader. Don't think you are a leader because it is your father's inheritance. No, that is not the reason. Jesus Christ said, and I repeat, I am among you as one who serves. I pray that the grace to be able to serve our generation, the Lord will bestow upon us in Jesus' name. Amen.